Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you have had a lovely week and thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. My name is Elisandra Garcia. I'm the Director of Engagement and a project designer at Dorado Architects. However, today I represent the work of a large team of pioneering developers, passionate architects and designers, trusted builders, and I'm here merely as a spokesperson for the work of a talented and dedicated team, which I am honored to be a part of. I also want to celebrate the monumental work that's being done by our client, Parrott Creek Child and Family Services, in an effort to restore dignity to Oregon's most vulnerable youth. Today, we'll be covering a few items. We'll be talking about trauma, why trauma-informed design matters, how it's applied to architecture, how we applied our knowledge into an engagement approach, how that design a concept, and further, the architectural design for Parrott Creek. However, I want to take a step back and help us understand why trauma-informed design matters. And it might seem obvious, but we need to understand trauma in a historical context. The first generation approaches to trauma focus on individual and clinical interventions to address the symptoms of PTSD. For example, individuals such as survivors of war, natural disasters and terrorism, refugees and immigrants fleeing homeland violence and persecution, which we see more and more of today. Early accounts describe the battle effect conditions of soldiers as soldiers' heart or nostalgia. And even with a more physical explanation of traumatic stress, such as shell shock from explosion or PTSD from a traumatic catastrophe, a prevailing attitude remained that the traumatic stress response was due to a character flaw. The second generation approaches to trauma focus on psychosocial education and empowered models which were designed to tap into self-healing forces to energize personal and social movement. These approaches are often based on group and peer support models and provide both support and education on the management of trauma and its effects. These approaches are not designed to replace clinical or alternative therapies, rather they provide a social context for care. But we have also learned that if these approaches are not implemented in organizations or programs that are trauma-informed, they will not take root and may lose effectiveness. Therefore, now we see trauma-informed care as a new paradigm for organizing public mental health and human services. Trauma-informed care changes the opening questions for those seeking services from what is wrong with you to what has happened to you. In a trauma-informed environment, survivors are empowered to proactively set goals and to manage progress towards these goals. So how does trauma affect us? Well, in the US, 70% of adults have encountered an adverse childhood experience, and 2/3 of people in treatment for substance abuse have experienced trauma in their life. That same trauma can increase the risk of mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, bipolarism, and also trauma patients are 2 times as likely to develop heart disease, cancer, and chronic lung disease due to the physical stress that our body endures during trauma. And what is happening in Oregon? Well, a 2022 OHSU study found that Oregon ranks second worst in the nation for drug-related deaths, worst for needing and not receiving treatment, and sadly worse in the nation for the percent of population of 12 or older with illicit drug disorders, both for children and adults. OHSU and OHA also assessed that a 49% gap in the provision of substance use treatment services for both children and adult services, and found that Black youth are 3.7 times more likely to be detained or committed to juvenile facilities in Oregon than their white peers. The study also found that up to 46% of children under 18 that have encountered contact with parole or probation officers or with a child welfare caseworker will most likely experience homelessness before the age of 25. And of course, we have seen the long-term socioeconomic impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, which increased the use of drugs, housing insecurity, mental health challenges, and a failing educational achievement. But that's where Parrott Creek comes in. Parrott Creek, since 1968, has been supporting youth and families impacted by the juvenile justice system and the child welfare systems, as well as those struggling with addiction and mental health needs or homelessness. Parrott Creek's approach is to address than various social, economic, and health factors that cause trauma to individuals and communities, and that lead to reduced access to resources, supports, and opportunities. Parrott Creek combines evidence-based and trauma-informed treatment models for restorative justice and mindfulness to restore individuals, to help individuals become aware of past and current behaviors, and to develop tools that make concrete changes. Their programs range from early interventions and community support to outpatient treatment and intensive residential services, which you will learn a lot from today. But how did we get here? The story of Parrott Creek is really a miracle. Starting in the 1970s, when the campus was built on an outdated vision of understanding of children's needs. And fast forward to 2010, when an initial master plan was created to renovate what is currently there. In 2015, the county assessed that there was over $1 million of deferred maintenance, as well as an urgent need for seismic upgrade and fire suppression systems. Luckily, in 2019, the state allocated $3.5 million in the lottery revenue bond. And in 2020, Connie Baumer donated $500,000 as a lead gift, therefore pushing Clackamas County to deed as the land, buildings, and liabilities for Parrott Creek. And again, at the end of 2020, Access revised a master plan. However, the coronavirus pandemic hit us, and the $3.5 million were revoked. However, in 2021, Parrott Creek kept the dream alive. Access Design Group continued the master plan. And as Parrott Creek coalesced with Audrey to re-envision Parrott Creek, it helped them to raise their aspirations. And therefore, in 2022, El Dorado was incredibly honored to be awarded with the project. Parrott Creek is home to a super special program called the Cultural Ecology Project. And I'm honored to have Autumn Martinez today, a program coordinator, to share a little bit about the project. Autumn, if you wouldn't mind.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Autumn, and I'm the Cultural Ecology Program Coordinator at Parrott Creek. I've been with Parrott Creek since last October, and I am very pleased to share with you all a little bit about the Cultural Ecology Program. So the program began in 2020 after Clackamas County transferred ownership of 80 acres of land next to our youth residential treatment center. This land consists of a mixed coniferous forest, upper grassland area, a large wetland area, as well as Parrott Creek itself running through the property. The program was created as a response to the needs of our community, and so it provides a safe place to gather cultural use materials while actively healing the land by prioritizing traditional ecological knowledge, and it also addresses trauma held in the youth, the community, and the land. So what I like to do to explain what we do is split it into three main areas. So we have habitat restoration, cultural engagement, and youth and community engagement. So when we approach habitat restoration, we approach it with decolonization in mind, and this means that we are centering our restoration efforts on indigenous values, knowledge, and principles. The land that we now steward has sat for many, many years untouched and unloved, and because of this, there's virtually no data on what's happening on our property. And to responsibly steward the land, we need to know what's there and what the conditions are in. So in addition to traditional Western methods of flora and fauna surveys, we also survey for cultural use materials, such as first foods, basketry, and weaving materials, and so on. We prioritize first foods and culturally important species. We plant according to shifting plant phenology in regions as a result of changing climate zones. And we're also thoughtful of non-native plant removal by not using things such as pesticides, herbicides, and strategically plan removal of these non-native species that in a time of year that won't impact other ecosystems. And we also have plans to reintroduce cultural fire and prescribed burns, especially in the upper grassland area where we hope to restore the area to an oak savanna and camas prairie. So some of our recent restoration projects include conducting flora and fauna surveys. So these two pictures on the left of the screen are some trail cameras that we set up with some of the youth and some other programs that we partner with. We also partner with other sorry, ecologists and nonprofits like Bark to survey for endangered and sensitive and keystone species such as lamprey, beaver, and freshwater mussels. We also work with our partners and volunteers to remove non-native species and replant species in those areas. And when we do a lot of our restoration work, we try to be inclusive as possible to our youth and the community. So as I mentioned before, we do some cultural use surveys pretty often, and these can help inform our cultural and community engagements with tribes and other community members. Indigenous people face disproportionate impacts of climate change as well as intergenerational trauma. The Portland metro area is actually the ninth largest urban population of Indigenous people in the United States, and those living into urban areas face particular challenges when it comes to safe and appropriate access to cultural materials. And increasing access to appropriate natural areas is vital to the future of traditional knowledge. So, we prioritize long term sustainability founded on reciprocal relationships. And we know that hands on intergenerational learning not only improves resilience to the effects of climate change, but it also aids in healing generations of trauma that's held in the land in the Indigenous communities. So these pictures show the All Nations canoe family pulling cedar bark for traditional regalia, and this was a very special moment where it was a grandpa and a son and his granddaughter all together. The center picture is the bark after processing at the tree. And then the right picture is when we had Naya's Green Workforce Academy come out and they helped us do a cultural use survey for future cedar trees as well as historically pulled cedar trees. And lastly, I want to highlight the work that we do with our community, especially with the youth in our programs and other Native youth. The youth at our residential program are referred to us by the Oregon Youth Authority from throughout Oregon. It's all male youth who are mostly from the ages of 15 to 19 years old. They all come from highly traumatized backgrounds, and because of this, Parrott Creek offers an alternative to incarceration using individualized treatment plans, mindfulness and other emotional regulation exercises, drug and alcohol counseling by certified counselors, and group therapy sessions by qualified therapists, as well as using nature as a tool for therapy and treatment. So the Cultural Ecology Program provides strength-based green workforce development, environmental education, and trauma-informed ways to build personal relationships with the land. We engage similarly with Native youth in our community. So these pictures show some of that. And on the right is when we recently collaborated with Tryon Creek State Park and other programs to host the entire Chamawa Indian School for an afternoon of service learning. So the students got to learn how to identify culturally important plants, aquatic ecosystems, learn about wildlife, and look at specimens, mulch restoration areas, and engage with different natural resource cultural materials. And yeah, so this was just a small overview of what the Cultural Ecology Program does and hopes to continue to do for many years to come. We have many more exciting partnerships and projects coming up, so stay tuned for that. And thank you. Back to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much, Autumn. One of our favorite parts of Parrott Creek for sure. We'll talk now about the project, and I want to reiterate that I'm here representing the work of a much larger team. Our client development team set a high standard of development goals, which were anchored on design excellence, development innovation, environmental stewardship, and equitable outcomes. You can see a picture here of us, of all of the team at the groundbreaking ceremony. These goals created a set of development principles to ensure that we can co-create a regional center of excellence. The principles state, let kids be kids, site stewardship, practical and cost-effective projects, in combination with flexibility, adaptability, and resiliency, and of course, centered on healing and restorative justice. When responding to the RFP, Eldorado realized that we were a great fit for this project. The values upheld by Parrott Creek, our collective lived experiences and our expertise, aligned to the project requirements and its long-term vision. Our approach, design excellence, engagement, and pragmatism really created the framework for this powerful project. Parrott Creek's 80-acre property is located in rural Clackamas County, just outside the Portland metro region. The sites include a meadow, a wetland, a creek, and a coniferous forest. An orchard occupied the north portion of the site with cherries, apples, and other fruits. The oldest trees are believed to be about 80 years old. Native salmon, stinging nettle, and camas were once plentiful and harvested for food and medicinal purposes. The current 12,000 square feet of buildings are located on a 5-acre land as a resource for nature therapy, indigenous environmental stewardship, and community access. The current buildings can serve up to 20 youth in treatment at any given time. However, under current Parrott Creek stewardship, the organization has formed new meaningful collaborations with indigenous leaders, as Autumn shared with us just previously, that focus on sustainable initiatives for multiple character zones of the site. When our team first visited the site, we were stunned by the natural beauty of the landscape. And nestled in the forest, we noticed that the lack of visibility to the campus entries might create some confusion for first-time visitors. The site was also previously a farmstead, with the farmhouse that you can see in the image number 2 as the oldest structure on site, which was originally built in the 1940s. We also noticed that although the campus had been remodeled numerous times, the buildings in the site layout lacked clarity and connectivity. And during our walk across the campus, we became aware of the minimal walking paths and the need for more than just a temporary shade structure. The farmhouse, however, was not only formally and programmatically inspiring, it was also the only building on site with a covered porch with a view to the open landscape. Our team, grounded on trauma-informed design research and the power of community as a healing tool, investigated porch space as a seed idea. A porch has a safe membrane, a nestled and connected system that ensures that all users always have agency and option to connect with others, to connect with the landscape, or perhaps to find a place to be alone and decompress. We were also inspired by the cultural and historical significance of porches in domestic and community spaces across all cultures. And within the context of trauma-informed design, porches do provide a gentle gradient transition from loud activities to quiet, more private environments. Porches are also some of the most intimate conversations take place, where stories are shared, where families welcome each other. A porch has the ability to connect us to each other into a larger world. Recognizing the impact of trauma on the lives of highly traumatized youth is not only a professional imperative for El Dorado, it is also a deeply empathetic commitment to the way that we design. The design team kept exploring typologies of porches, particularly motivated by the existing farmhouse site that I mentioned. The team began to imagine architectural landscape at porch as a unique experience at Parrott Creek. We explored the dynamism of a porch space that could wrap around, that could cut through, or that could open a building form into the landscape. The porch space consequently became the vertebrae of circulation that bind the entire campus together. And further trauma-informed design explorations underscored the importance of gentle transitions of space and activity to another, particularly in an effort to avoid dysregulation, which is very common among trauma victims. Our initial response to Parrott Creek was a vision of an interconnected campus whose buildings and site strategy are anchored on safety, harmony, and site stewardship. And rather than one building, or a collection of separate buildings, this is a campus as an experience that links buildings and landscapes with a porch system that mitigates potential triggers for young residents. From the beginning, we focused on creating a diversity of landscape experiences that allowed users to control how much they engage with nature. We also proposed that this experience be extended into the interior, as elements transition open and public spaces to carefully curated privacy that allows the user with a choice between isolation and connection. This is incredibly important for trauma-informed design. The soft transitions from the exterior to the interior could help youth regulate after class, after treatment, or after play. And as we began the project, we laid a design excellence framework that worked in tandem with our engagement approach. Because Parrott Creek's unique approach to restorative justice addresses the various social, economic, and health factors that cause trauma, El Dorado's trauma-informed design engagement methodology had to do the same. It placed the youth, the staff, and families at the center of every design decision. And through a deep involvement of conversations and dynamic activities, El Dorado was able to produce key ideas and design drivers to create a new master plan for the Parrott Creek campus. Through a series of more than 12 focused engagement sessions and countless design discussions, We were able to document and honor the needs and stories of those who work and live at Parrott Creek. Our engagement methodology focuses primarily on listening and connecting through storytelling and making. Creative, culturally responsive, and accessible workshops were hosted on site. Our first event was a kickoff engagement with the staff. And here you see a selected images of precedent projects that the staff was really gravitated to. We asked them, what are some projects that excite you? They pointed out they desired to honor the Pacific Northwest, vernacular architecture, a clear connection to the landscape, options to retrieve and be alone, options to connect and be with others, openness to the outside, and of course, spaces to play. We learned from parents that they wish they had a more home-like experience when they visit their children, such as covered outdoor patios or perhaps even a bigger kitchen so that they could bring food during visits. They were very vocal about the normalization of visits, with spatial options to sit in a group or perhaps in a private outdoor space. Some of these parents haven't seen their children for over 6 months, so it was important that the transition in the visit became humane, dignified, and full of love. Parents also wish that there was perhaps a bigger dining room with options to eat outside, or perhaps even a garden to walk together in. Overall, parents really wish to host most family activities to reconnect, spaces to laugh, spaces to catch up on gossip, and perhaps find new ways to remind their children that they're loved and that this is only temporary. During our first site and ecology visit, which was hosted by Ame, who leads the cultural ecology project that Autumn just mentioned, walked us through the entire site, pointing out the natural history, the current activities that they do on the landscape. Ame also pointed out places where there is no access or where furniture might be needed. We mapped all these items on site as she guided us around the different ecological habitats. In green text here, you can see some of Ame's direct quotes. We definitely noted that the cultural ecology program needed a home of its own with the landscape art design that could support it. We walked with Ame from the top of the site that you see on your far left, all the way down to the creek to your far right. Even though we knew that this was a challenge, this dramatic topography of lay, we also knew there was a potential asset to the project. Listed on your top left are a few of the species found on site, even though I'm sure there's much more from 2 summers ago. At the time when we engaged with staff, the residential staff manager at Parrott Creek was led by Leah Lamb. Leah and residential counselors welcomed the El Dorado design team during their weekly Tuesday meetings, and it allowed us to understand their experience, their schedules, their personalities, and the daily activities. We basically shadowed the staff for a few days to understand their routines. We knew that although Parrott Creek's in need of treatment spaces for residents, it also needs to support its staff. Leah's process every morning begins with reading what happened the night before or the day before, and to act from there. Therefore, we asked Leah, how can these buildings work better for you? As we connected with the youth, we needed to consider how the physical environment affects identity, worth, and dignity, and how it could potentially promote environment. Our team had to be debriefed on how important it is to acknowledge the effect that the physical environment has on your attitude, your mood, your behavior, and particularly for teenage individuals who are already undergoing so much physical, emotional, and spiritual changes. Therefore, our first engagement was simply sharing pastries and getting a walking tour of the facilities led by the Youth Council. We empowered them to lead the process by showing us their favorite and not so favorite places, as well as documenting their emotional memory to the site. The design team focused on earning the trust of the youth group, which enabled us to have more honest and personable conversations. Engaging the youth through art, storytelling, and an interactive sidewalk really allowed the design team to understand their lived experiences and really document emotional memory to places, but most of all, honor all the voices that are impacted by the new facilities at Parrott Creek. The youth engagement workshops involved multiple drawing exercises. We brought in with us site plans and perspectives and sections, and we used this to illustrate the campus to the youth in a different dimension. Using trace paper and printed drawings, that the youth answered a couple of the following questions. What are some of the important community spaces that already exist? Where do you find belonging? What activities currently exist that you already really like that doesn't have a space? And you can see here in the images, these are their direct sketches, their direct text, and direct quotes. The consistent commentary from youth was a big desire to be outside more, during rain or during heat. They map where they think the best walking paths should be. They mark spaces they visit where they feel dysregulated, where they go when they need to find peace. The youth also documented all the possible landscape areas in which they should be placed. They noticed the existing building relationships, which helped us to understand their everyday routine, what it's like to wake up in the morning, when lunch happens, when school happens, when afternoon happens. The feedback also pointed to positive assets on the site, like the open field where they play sports or their beloved basketball court. And we finalized our series of engagements with the youth that helped us understand what interior spaces could make them feel comfortable, what interior elements might help them focus or decompress, or what could be their ideal living room experiences. The collages here portray a desire to connect with the outdoors consistently, to the natural landscape, to find comfort in soft and comfortable furniture. One of the best stories we heard from my youth was that having big windows to look at the sky made their problems a lot smaller and easier to tackle. Other feedback we'd heard is that they enjoyed natural color tones. They were inspired by Oregon's natural landscapes. They enjoyed spaces to enjoy the sunset or the sunrise and opportunities to engage with fauna. They mentioned also that too rich, too colorful, or too dense patterns could be overstimulating for treatment or quiet spaces. And since the youth is not allowed to bring all of their belongings into the space, they long for the ability to customize their rooms with art or photos of their family. This map here is a compilation of the youth and staff and families' experiences and memories on site. The porch membrane concept seemed to perfectly respond to their desires for more outdoor spaces to support Parrott Creek's everyday operations and living rituals. This diagram here really set the stage for the design process. Through our consistent engagement with AME, we also gathered inspiration from Native American architecture. These were some precedents that were provided with AME, and these began to inform some of our thinking. As you can see, the presence of natural materials and contemporary log houses gave way to inspirational ideas on form and structure. Sustainability is also a major part of this project. The design team is coordinating and documenting necessary components for the Energy Trust of Oregon path to net zero, as well as LEED Gold Target certification. This will be a resilient building with solar and battery storage. And why is this important in trauma-informed design? Making a building climate resilient is crucial for young trauma residents, as it ensures a stable energy supply, preventing disruptions that could trigger the trauma. A consistent and secure environment helps foster their sense of safety and well-being, which is essential to their recovery and their stability. In addition to engaging the youth at Parrott Creek in the design process, Outdoor Development, Eldorado Architects, and Your Street, Your Voice also hosted design studios at Harvard University Graduate School of Design and the University of Oregon College of Design. Outdoor studios focus on the landscape architecture components, and the Parrott Creek youth got to engage and guide Harvard students with their proposals. The youth actually were the jury. Our studio at U of O investigated the skill building through a studio that questioned the needs of students with neurodiversity, mental health disorders, and how architecture could respond to their needs. The Your Street, Your Voice studio empowered the youth at Parrott Creek to design pavilion structures for the landscape spaces. It was truly an incredible experience to see the compassion and understanding to come out of these conversations. And it's also worth noting that all the Parrott Creek youth that participate in these sessions received high school credit for every part of their participation in the process. And now that the project is currently in construction, WASH is currently deploying engagement efforts in which the youth are invited into construction sites. They're given construction site passports. They learn about particular material through listening sessions, walking tours, and they get a stamp for their participation. This truly has been one of its kind, this process. The students are incredibly engaged and excited to make a career out of construction. They see a path forward, and they can relate to each other and those that they can see the work being built by. This robust engagement and methodology gave way to 5 design drivers that are detailed here. Number 1 was to acknowledge the site's cultural and natural history through the engagement of indigenous organizations, but also through the implementation of design ideas to celebrate this history. Number two, to promote the existing groundbreaking work by AME with the Culture Ecology Project, again, that Autumn just shared with us, and making sure that AME has all the spatial requirements to support this program, along with the landscape design that supports their activities. Number three, to create a connected, efficient, and safe campus. Number four, to be inspired by Oregon's natural landscape when it came to materiality, color, interiors, and placing landscape as an asset and an experience for youth and staff. And fifth, to continuously engage all the community at Parrott Creek, which might produce a lot more tailored fit spaces that we anticipate. And how is the design affected? Well, with Parrott Creek, we had to study new ways to organize how the youth will experience the spaces. While this was our initial program list, and the program list that still exists, the team, in collaboration with Parrott Creek staff, developed a new programming structure that will actually improve the operations and promoted a cohort community living. How can we think expansively about the program? How can these buildings work more efficiently for the staff and for the youth? The number of students correlates with the number of staff, new built area, and financial strains. So the team was on a path to study the best ratio to satisfy first and foremost the youth. The intent is to provide a healing space rather than institutional space. So cohorts allow youth to gain comfort in routine activities with the same group of people throughout the day. They will be grouped with other youth, more like themselves, and get more staff attention for critical needs. Through connected spaces that you might see on the far right, youth are able to find themselves in a safe setting. Programmatically, they're in the in-between spaces, bridging larger areas like the dining room and the admin offices. There are spaces that link youth to the next step to healing. El Dorado has interpreted these connecting spaces as another layer of the membrane, as spaces to move through multiple times a day. They can be interior or exterior. They can be a quiet room with a view or an outdoor covered porch. It's a transition from physical space as well as an emotional one. We began to study the best entry sequence and movement through space in each cohort's living areas and asked how youth will be able to move through these interior layers, beginning with the porch, more public, at the exterior, and into the interior, down into a private space. Again, these configurations were based on daytime requirements of 3 staff to 5 students ratio. And we then explored multiple ways in which the cohorts could be delivered. We further pushed additional layout options for these cohorts, weighing out the pros and cons. And in response to staff concerns about having all living programs located in proximity, this alternate scheme that you see here shows one that is putting the living residential program up the hill. There's still a public administration component to greet guests at the main entrance. The school and recreation are located at the center of the site for easy access to all students and staff. This helps to set up our gradient concept even further, welcoming private guests at the admin with a private, more secure courtyard for students on the other side of the entry. The recreation that you see on the bottom here in the middle would be nestled within the slope of the hill near the existing outdoor basketball court. And this option was vetted and approved by Parrott Creek and Audrey. Moving on to schematic design, and the following plan is about to show us a couple more contingencies. Early on the design process, Parrott Creek reminded us that youth come first and to strive for what's best, not just for what's good enough. So the organization of the site started with cohorts again. The grouping of these cohorts drove the length of the building and location on site. We wanted each house to have privacy from one another, yet still be connected through pathways. In this plan diagram, you can observe the chosen layout with the porch space threaded through the buildings, creating a consistent flow across programs, but also mitigating the privacy as needed. And as mentioned, the circulation is a critical component to the layout, so that while the youth are able to walk from class to therapy or to the room, visitors and staff are able to move across the site at the same time without distraction. The private spaces for the youth are primarily to the south, more public circulation to the north, and pathways or communal spaces are in between. In this sketch section, you can observe the site being cut through the communal courtyard and dining room porch. The existing topography helps her organize a gentle transition from the communal, from the right, private programming, all the way to the constructed space into the natural world on the far left. In the second section, you can see, as we're cutting through a living residential building, the network of porches define the threshold gradients between the individual and the communal, which is further enhancing these gentle transitions between the interior and the exterior. You always have an option to go back into your room and be alone, or you always have an option to be in a hallway and connect with others, which is part of the 3 comfort, choice, and community for trauma-informed design. With this new vision, Parrott Creek will be expanding to serve up to 40 youth, which is twice as much as the current capacity. In this campus sketch, we can see how the vision has taken form with new parameters and new learned lessons. And in par with our talented landscape architecture team, Agency Landscape and Planning, who also responded to our trauma-informed design research and engagement feedback. In this diagram, you can see how they negotiated the progression from the public and refined space to the more private and natural experience. The landscape was defined by then character zones that we will be able to experience and appreciate more in the following renderings that I will show you here just in a minute. We reacted to the landscape architecture design and quickly realized how the system worked really perfectly. You can see the meadow house, the creek house, the forest house, and how the future expansions play a role within the architecture, the landscape, and the site placement of this. At our El Dorado studio, we took advantage of the opportunity to materialize this site into a physical model, and it helped us to visualize the topography and building placements. This was also a very helpful tool when communicating the project to our client and to our stakeholders. This plan diagram allowed us to communicate how we envision the circulation changing again from public to private, and where staff are given the agency to use the landscape and porches as community spaces as well. In contrast to the sketch section that I showed you before, in our finalist section, we are now celebrating these achieved views to the landscape, going from far right to left. This section shows the relationship of the active spaces, which are the kitchen, the dining room, that opens up into a porch, overlooks a courtyard. And on the other side of the courtyards are classrooms and the terrace steps that lead you down the hillside and onto the creek. There's a comfortable rhythm of enclosed space and protected space into open space. As we cut through a residential building facing east, you can further note these gradients of experiences that guide youth from the exterior to the entry, offering breezeways and moments to pause and recluse, and at the terminus of the buildings, a spectacular view to the forest. The youth really enjoy the views to the outdoors. They were also excited about the possibility of having an enhanced weight room. The weight room got the youth really excited and actually uttered development of lights by bringing in a personal weight trainer to help them find the right equipment. It's currently located here in the bottom right, where you see my cursor, spilling out into a deep porch that could be used for outdoor yoga or stretching. And again, it's a constant connection to the outdoors that empowers mentally and physically. This building is the Creek building, taking on the eco-habitat of Parrott Creek, since it lies just down the hill from here. It has 2 levels of programs for administration, therapy, connect spaces, and for youth housing. And again, what we heard from staff is that as much as the youth need their dignified spaces and the spaces to retrieve, so did the staff. So we accommodated a lower level where they have an open break room and a large meeting room and a mother's room. El Dorado also built a physical model of this residential building that I've been talking about to show its structural integrity in relation to the topography. We were actually really excited to portray our ideas on the structural rhythm, the vernacular aesthetics of the roof. And at El Dorado, we really take pride in making. So physical models are an integral part of our design process, but also the way that we communicate to our clients and to our stakeholders. So we have heard what this property was like before. We've heard about what trauma is, how it affects our bodies, how it affects space. And we've heard about Parrott Creek and how the organization is part of the solution. When our team first visited, we were all struck by the calmness of the greenery, the views from the hillside nestling within the trees, which lended itself to a feeling of safety. The land is a flourishing mesh of ecologies, forest, wetland, grasslands, and found giant boulders that we become to discover during the construction process. We wanted to honor that relationship between the landscape and the building for a connected, safe, and efficient campus. It took us many iterations. It took us many times to try out the right building placements and minimize site work, capture the right views, avoid existing trees. But we believe that this realized vision of Parrott Creek is a result of decades of work by the organization, the passion from the dedicated staff, the hard work of architects and designers, but above all, it truly is a vision of how our society should treat young people, particularly those who are exposed and reshaped by trauma. In this following rendering, the living room, which is the terminus of the house, is characterized by 4 7x7 windows flanking the corner. This is where youth will meet as a group or have a choice to sit on the couch, play games at a table with friends, or sit at a table in the window bench to embrace the outdoors at a protected elevation. You can also observe the ceiling rises to a vault to give height and open up to the landscape. And again, of course, the wood brings warmth and might be a more of a homey feel. The wood acoustic panels finish in the ceiling also help keep the noise levels low. In each sleeping unit, each youth will have their own room to honor their individuality. We also want to honor their agency and give them the ability to express that. The furniture and finishes are durable, safe, maintainable, and as needed, replaceable. Nothing is precious here, but carefully detailed. The wall covering is tough and has a nice linen texture, which can be touched for a self-soothing technique. The bed and closet are maple wood and will be made by the inmates of the Oregon Correctional Enterprise. A magnetic board and ledge allowed the youth to hang images or display personal items. Not shown here is a chalkboard paint behind the door for them to express their thoughts in a bold yet private way. Large casement windows bring in natural light and fresh air with room darkening shades that are operable. Again, this is eco-habitat is the creek, so the tones are blue. And for each eco-habitat sets the theme and mood for the color palette of the interiors. The dining room, of course, is characterized by its proximity to the communal courtyard with a spectacular view of the forest, which makes this space an incredibly active and lively space. The Eco House and Porch is another communal area, which is designed around the youth and the broader indigenous community. We envision that this porch hosts Amish cultural ecology program, where she would take the youth out into nature walks into the 80-acre site or use as a gathering space for other community members. She plans to invite visitors to teach at traditional activities such as harvesting cedar, as you heard from Ame, directly from the trees. This eco house is also a meeting space and a communal living room for all. It leads out into the covered porch, sheltered from the weather, yet connected to the landscape. The communal courtyard is characterized by being enclosed by the administration building and the dining room porch. You can notice here where the roof lines almost meet at where the terrace steps below and the creek beyond. At the bottom of the Hazel Hall, observing the meadow, we can observe that with variable site grades, we wanted to touch lightly on the land. So creating a hovering extension of the buildings that seems to grow into and out of the landscape seemed perfect. The pathways wrapped around the buildings, working with the existing grade and provide accessible runs. Stopping points along the pathway celebrate existing moments within the site, like the maple tree at the forest house. Following here, I'm going to show you a couple of construction photos. Again, our intent was to create a familiar shape and vernacular to the Pacific Northwest, a simple gable form held up by trusses for a repeatable and efficient structure. Simple, durable, accessible materials were chosen for the exterior as well. You can see here the communal courtyards taking place as we go along. Some of those breezeways moments. This actually is a picture from today where we got some updated imagery from our project architect, Dan. Our team, again, I just want to reiterate that this project, all in all, really incorporated charming from design approach that addresses the relationship between healing, landscape, design, and the user. Again, I'm only ever so lucky to be part of this amazing team. We're hoping to have this done by next year, I think so. I'm also inviting our principal and project manager, David Soto, to answer any questions in construction or phasing. He's here with us today. And again, these are just some images of today. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the time with you today. Thank you.
Thank you. We can open up for Q&A. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to turn your camera on and mute yourself or put it in the chat box.
We were out on time. Really awesome. Well done. I appreciate you. And thank you all for letting us share this project here with you all today. And we'll be posting some updated construction pictures as we trek along with the project. Awesome.
This is Simon Fulford. If I'm allowed to speak, I'm Parrott Creek's executive director.
Yes, please, Simon. Good to see you.
You too, Ellie. Well, first of all, Ellie, thank you and the Eldo team for the presentation. And really, I'm the executive director of Parrott Creek. So I know social services and know nothing about building design and architecture. And really, I think what the presentation and the partnership between Parrott Creek and El Dorado really exemplifies is how El Dorado really helped translate our ethos and our values and how we work with kids and their families into getting the buildings to reflect that and incorporate that. And it was really an amazingly beautiful process, and just the kind of the conversation and the questions, and as Ellie said, you know, the El Dorado team spending time with us, with our youth, with our families on the site itself, and really kind of listening. And we didn't even know the questions to ask them, but through this process, it allowed us for these ideas to take shape. And then as our kind of language as social service providers, our language to be able to kind of express what we needed in spaces, I guess, kind of evolved and developed and strengthened. And then I think that really helped then El Dorado translate that actually into the building designs, exterior and interior, and placement on the site itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Simon, for sharing that. From the beginning, one of the interesting parts was that we were talking to a nonprofit that was used to doing things on a small sort of like whatever we can get vision, and you, Simon, from the beginning wanted us to bring the largest vision, the biggest vision as much as possible. And it was a retraining of us as architects to think within budget and within vision, and also inspire your staff to think outside of the norm of what they have worked with in the system before. Yeah.
It was really interesting for them, you know, because you kept challenging them, you and the team kept challenging them to, you know, you would say, what type of spaces do you need? And they would just say, well, we need what we have, or we make do, and really to push them to be like, well, we all make do with whatever we have, but what would make these programs excel? What would make our children excel? And what spaces would deliver that? And then they started dreaming.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Simon, for those words. And it's always an honor to work with clients like you. We're ever so lucky.
Honor is ours. Or it's shared. So
it's a shared honor for sure. Yeah. So I invite everybody to follow Parrott Creek on Instagram and Facebook. And they also have a culture ecology Instagram now where you can track all the research that's being done with youth. I think that beyond the architecture, what Parrott Creek is doing is really setting a stage of dignified treatment of people who have gone through terrible things and sometimes are being cornered into particular decisions. And we're lucky to be here as designers to try to manifest that into a building. So thank you again for the opportunity to share the project. Yeah, thank you, Simon, for sharing all the websites, for sure.
Thank you. It's an incredible story and an incredible project. We really appreciate you all being here.
Likewise, thank you for hosting us.
Thank you, Colleen.
All right, everyone. Well, I think we can give everyone a few minutes of their evening back if there are no more questions. But thank you all for attending, and thank you so much for to El Dorado for presenting. Have a good night, you guys.
Thank you so much, Colleen. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you so much.